Hello, welcome to the conversation here on News Central TV, where we bring you all the latest political updates happening on the continent. I am Gbenga Aborowa.
And I am Rita Omodia. It's another week for the conversation right here on News Central TV. And of course, a happy Independence Day to all Namibians. Yesterday, we celebrated Tunisia, celebrating 66 years of independence. And right now on the program today, we'll be looking at the situation in Mali as the ECOWAS Envoy has left the country without a deal on the election date. And later on the program, we will look at the political situation in Sudan, as we know that there are much more protests continuing, and the people of Sudan have said they will not back down on protests and calling for a civilian and transition of democracy. Now, let's start with matters in Sudan, where Sudan's army ruler, General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, was in Uganda, where he met with the East African country's president, Yoweri Museveni. Burhan told his host that the crisis in the country can be resolved through dialogue and reconciliation involving all parties.
In his response, President Museveni emphasized the need to form a transitional government made up of technocrats to lead the country to elections. Sudan has been rocked by for months of nearly daily demonstrations since last October, when the army overthrew the civilian government headed by Prime Minister Abdelrahim Abayazid. The protesters are demanding an end to army rule. Now, join us on the conversation this evening to discuss this is Dr. Majduline Tahir. She is an expert in Sudanese geopolitics and advocates for democracy and human rights. We also have Abdelrahim Abayazid, a political activist, joining us. Lady and gentlemen, welcome to the conversation. A warm welcome to you both.
Hi, welcome. Thank you very much for having us.
Welcome. Thank you.
Now, I'd like to start with Dr. Tahir. What do you make of the latest meeting between General Burhan and President Yoweri Museveni in Kampala?
First of all, thank you for inviting us to this to the news conference here today. And I would like to say that since October the 25th in the coup d'etat, both the head of the Sovereign Council and his deputy, General Burhan and General Hemeti, has been very active in trying to lobby some kind of regional and international support for their unsuccessful coup d'etat. Since October, they have failed to name a prime minister. They have failed systematically to form a government, a stable government. The economic situation is extreme, and they are facing total isolation internally. The only method of communicating with their people is through the gun and the tear gas, which, as you have mentioned, it has been daily. His trip to both Uganda and South Sudan is yet again an attempt to try and find a solution to the very tight and isolation of his government by trying to lobby in, as I said, regional and international support. Well, here there are two problems. The first one is that, number one, him and his deputy are unwilling to make any concessions. This is number one. And number two, that even if they made any form of concessions, the people in the street do not want any kind of power sharing. They have repeatedly and systematically sent this message through different means and ways, saying that they would like to see an all-civilian government in Sudan. This complicates the situation very much, I would say, for everyone, but certainly for the leaders of the coup d'etat and the leaders who have taken power in the Sudan now. Having said that, Uganda has been a very essential country, and President Museveni was a mediator for the normalization with Israel. And therefore, it has, I would imagine that his trip to to Uganda is yet again a reinforcement of the normalization with Israel, something that General Burhan has started back in 2020. So I imagine this is part of this kind of normalization program with Israel. There is something else, and that is there is an internal rivalry between Burhan and his deputy, General Hemeti, whereas General Hemeti have been seen to be received by a number of regional and international head of states, like his visit to Russia and his visit to United Arab Emirates and even his visit to Israel in the past few weeks. We have seen a very quiet President Burhan. So I'm not sure if this is in an attempt to try and show that he also is still a player, and he is very much in the heart of the theatrical show between the two men.
All right, Dr. Majduline, you've talked so much about how General Burhan is trying so much to gain regional support. Let's hear from Abdelrahim right now. Majduline said so much about Sudan's political junta trying to look for support from the regional bodies, talking about the visit to UAE, to Israel, to Russia. And now in Uganda, when he visited Uganda, President Museveni in his meeting with General Burhan emphasized the need to form a transitional government made up of technocrats to lead the country to election as a means of ensuring longer-lasting peace in Sudan. Now, Dr. Majduline said that as far as the political junta is, they do not see any means to concessions. Now, with the visit to Museveni, do you think he would likely listen to the negotiation talks with President Museveni?
Thank you very much for having us, or for having me for this conversation. I don't believe that Burhan will listen to any Burhan and his
deputy
committee will listen to Museveni, President Museveni, or any other governments or leaders around the world. Burhan he wants to rule Sudan. He dreamed about being a king of Sudan. Plus Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo Hemeti, the Janjaweed leader, they just wanted to rule. They just wanted to carry on what they have been doing since they were in al-Bashir. They are the committee members of al-Bashir Security Committee. So they wanted to go in the same direction. They wanted to be supported by the people who are being taken away from their places or from the governments, like the Islamic Front, whom they made the coup in 1989. Which also was against, or it was a democratic elected government at that time in 1989. So I don't think that, or I believe actually, as the Sudanese people, committees of local resistance committees don't believe in the government or the military to be sitting and ruling in Sudan. And they are fighting for that on a daily basis, peacefully. I don't think that Burhan will listen to any suggestions that will lead to them being away from the government, which is not their place. They are not supposed to rule. They are not rulers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They are part of the military, and they should be back to their barricades. And this is what is the Sudanese people saying every day, or going out to protest on a daily basis, on in a peaceful, civilized way. So whatever, with all due respect, whatever President Museveni will say, Bashir colleagues will not listen to. They will carry on with the same thing. But what you are saying about this meeting, or about this summit between the two, between President Museveni and Al-Burhan, In Sudan, this is not what is going on. As Dr. Majduline mentioned, the Israeli relation and the other issues. This visit is being, being declared as a negotiation between the two fractions in South Sudan, Riek Machar and President of South Sudan, and that's why they are in here. So even there is no proper or there is no any press conference or real talk being declared in the media for the Sudanese people or for the other countries. So I don't think that this is a serious thing. The say here is with the Sudanese people, with the people whom they have the right to have the right to rule. Those are the Sudanese people whom their slogan is peace, peace and democracy and freedom. I don't think that al-Bashir or al-Burhan will carry or will complete, will satisfy the Sudanese people or any other neighboring countries that they are ruling in democracy and they are being elected democratically. So the only solution is, and we ask in the support, we call upon all the African leaders to sit with them and to ask them that to go away, leave the people rule themselves, leave the people choose whom they wanted to rule, leave the people to go democratically, peacefully. And ask them to stop the killing. As you were mentioning, this is 87, up to now 87 is being killed, 80,000 is being injured. This protest is going on a daily basis. It will not stop. We asked the people over there, we asked these young people over there, we asked all the Sudanese whom they are out on the streets. They said they will not they will never give up. They will carry on, and they are not just going out on the street. They are doing so many things. They are preparing for the constitution, doing for the plans, planning for the transitional government, what they want, what is the Sudan should be, how is the Sudan, what is the role of Sudan will be in the African region or around the world. That's what it is actually. But I don't believe that Burhan will listen to any democratic, peaceful solution. He sits on the power, he has the guns, and he wants to shoot whoever will say no to him.
Thank you, Abdelrahim. I would like to bring back Dr. Tahir. Now, according to the Sudanese Doctors Union, at least 87 people have been killed and thousands wounded in this bloody crackdowns on protesters. We do know that before the military got into power and had this power sharing agreement, General Omar al-Bashir was there for 30 odd years. And don't you think the protesters, knowing that, and Abdelrahim confirmed this, that General Burhan doesn't listen to anyone, and Emeti too, they want to stay in power, knowing the sorts of people they're dealing with and knowing that they're not open to concessions, should there be a negotiated type of settlement? And what can the protesters do to stop this daily killing? Because they're the ones feeling the effect of the continuous protests.
Some time ago, I gave an analysis to some Norwegians interested in the politics of Sudan, and this is how I put it. There are two camps here. There are the people who are, their strength is the number and the age, the spirit, and the belief in what they have, and what in their cause. Plus an incredible level of organization, an impressive level of organization. It is so impressive. You would think that the youth and the grassroots movement of the Sudan is so organized as if it was a well-trained army. It is not a well-trained army. It's a peaceful demonstration, yet the level of organization, resilience, and spirit and energy is as such. And when at the end of the demonstration, young man or woman, they go back home, they go back to their families. Yes, they have lost a friend or two, and but they are filled with hope. They are proud. The mothers and fathers and grandfathers receive them at home with pride and respect. The youth of the Sudan received a lot of respect within their own families for what they are standing for. And they also have received a lot of respect internationally and regionally as well. This is on this camp. On the other camp, there are very young soldiers who are very poorly paid. They have extremely poor conditions. They sleep literally on the ground, on the floor. They are poorly equipped. They are poorly trained. All they have are these guns. Well, these guns here, for a country, for an economy which is suffering so much, and Burhan and Hemeti, they have a very hard economic situation now. So what they do is that they spend a lot of money every day try to control this. And mind you, this is not just demonstrations in Khartoum. This is all over the Sudan. And Sudan is quite a large country. Yeah. So therefore, controlling all these people is very costly. And the cost is two things: psychological, both for the leaders and for the soldiers who are out there shooting. Plus also, it is costly in terms of money. In addition, whereas the people are every day getting stronger and stronger in their unity and so on, the other camp, there is huge cracks between them, right at the top all the way down to the bottom. And you see every day there is a crack in the other camp from the top between Burhan and Hemeti. Hemeti is trying very hard to sideline his partner all the time in very aggressive moves and incredibly controversial statements that he gives now and then. And on the other hand, Burhan, who is the president, you could see very clearly that he is a very lame president and very weak president.
Can there be, Dr. Majduline, can there be a coup within a coup? Because you're seeing fractures between Hemeti and Al-Burhan. Do you think it's possible that Hemeti could actually take over the position of Al-Burhan?
Well, de facto he does. In practice he does. He is. Every move, even his body language says that he is the president of the country. Whether or not he is they're going to go like against each other violently, that I am not so sure about, but I don't, I think it might very well happen. But the fact that there are confrontations and there are cracks between this partnership, that is very clear. And the ambitions of Hemeti are very evident and very clear to everybody that's following the Sudanese cause and the Sudanese crisis. He is a very ambitious man.
Okay, let's go over to you, Abdelrahim. Now, Dr. Majduline has highlighted so much about what this protest is going on and, of course, the crack between Al-Burhan and, of course, Hemeti. But we also know that following the military takeover, we know that International World Financial Organization, Western governments suspended the assistance to Sudan in order to pressure the generals to return a civilian-led government. And I must say, probably that's why we see the Sudan president going to all the regional bodies and trying to get economic and financial support. So what more can the international community do, and what has been the international response to the crisis?
The crisis is going to be going on, and unfortunately, it's going to go more. Situation is going to be deteriorated because we know that there's so many countries planning to put more sanction on Sudan, on the government leaders, on the resources that the government is used to depend on. I mean, like there's because of the coup, because of this coup. I mean, like there's millions were promised before for the transitional government to go on. Is being stopped, although or withdrawn. Although it was the government, that transitional government, who agreed to all the whatever the plans for the International Monetary Fund. But I mean, like, what happened is stop that. Plus now, I mean, like, this demonstration, this protest, nobody, I mean, like, is willing to invest or to do anything in Sudan. It's a very fragile. I mean, like, inflation is high to them. I mean, like, to the top. People are, I mean, like, suffering. All petrol or electricity and gas
it has adverse effects on the economy. Sorry, I want to quickly jump in there, Abdelrahim. You talked about the Western countries withdrawing economic aid and money that was meant to go into the transition, and they're not holding it. But at the same time, we've seen a lot of diplomatic push by Ameti and General Burhan. They've been to places like Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates. So where the West is blocking aid from one side, the others, Russia, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, they're helping to prop up the Sudanese regime. Isn't this counterproductive? And wouldn't it give the regime the impetus to go on forever, regardless of what the protesters want to do?
The regime, as I said from the beginning, I mean, like, they will not listen to any government, or they wanted to rule, and they're actually fulfilling the interest of those countries in Sudan. I mean, like, we hear those, we have seen the news. I mean, like, how is Russia is I mean, like, getting their support or getting their strength from the gold that being taken from Sudan to get their reserve and to prepare for this war against Ukraine. Also, I mean, like, they have their allies around the area, like Ethiopia, like Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates. These people, these countries are benefiting from the situation in Sudan, from the military in Sudan, because they are paying for the military to defend them in other places, like in Yemen, like in even in their own countries. So they are benefiting from the situation. Democracy in Sudan, where we are dreaming and working for, will not make those countries happy, will not allow it to be happening. But the people of Sudan, the young people of Sudan, they are determined to achieve that democracy, to build that country, democratic civil country, democratic civil civilian government. This is the aim. So yeah, those people are trying to support, they're working under the table, even from the Western countries. I mean, like, that's not the full, that's not the truth. That's not the complete picture. I mean, like, they're saying that they're against al-Bashir, against al-Bashir and al-Burhan. They're supporting the transitional government or transitional period process in Sudan, but they're not doing that, actually. In fact, this is not...
Abdelrahim, what does the international community actually stand to gain? Because you're saying that in words, you're saying they're against the transition, they're against the military junta, but actually they're not fulfilling the agreement. So what do they stand to gain from this military junta?
So, sorry, the question again, please.
I said, you talked about the international community saying that they're against the junta, but actually, in physical terms, they're actually supporting it. What does the international community stand to gain from this crisis?
I mean, like, they are benefiting from this. They wanted to see, I mean, like, who can rule. It's the same scenario what they have been doing with al-Bashir. Al-Bashir, without the support of the Western countries, will never survive for 30 years. But in fact, there was sanction imposed on al-Bashir at that time, and this is the type of politics, under the table politics. Going on with al-Burhan, because if they wanted to stop the support, they have to say that, I mean, like, you are out, there is no any legitimacy, but they are supporting. There is deal with Hemeti, with Daglo. They are meeting with them in Sudan, in Khartoum. They have seen that 87 of these protesters, peaceful protesters, being killed. They have seen the gas stairs killing young people. They have been that this junta killing, trying to kill the dreams of these young people, the dream of a democratic country. And they are dealing with them. They are so soft on them. And they are, I mean, like I'm saying it, they are supporting them in a way that they are dealing with them. They are trying to ask the civilian camp that to sit together with the military. We don't want that. Our people doesn't want that. We don't want the military to sit to negotiate. We want them just to hand the power, to stay away from the power, because there is no any democracy around the world being supported or being shared, the power being shared by the military.
Okay, thank you, Abdelrahim. Just before we wrap things
going on and carry on.
Okay, thank you, Abdelrahim. Just before we wrap things up, I'd like to bring in Dr. Tahir here quickly, because we're fast running out of time. Is there any hope for a negotiated settlement to the current crisis in Sudan? And how can you sketch us a picture of how Sudan's transition can get back on track?
Well, like Abdelrahim has mentioned, Bashir did fall, although he was supported by very powerful friends. And Burhan and Hemeti are even weaker than Bashir. They are a lot weaker than Bashir. The economy is a lot more fragile. The world, the international politics have played in such a way that the coup d'etat for Burhan and Hemeti is very badly timed. They have less friends with less money to support them. And the situation in the Sudan, the political awareness in the Sudan makes it a lot more difficult now to loot the country in the same manner that has happened during the times of al-Bashir. The amount of gold which was smuggled out of the country is not the same now because of political awareness, because the people are literally out there guarding and protecting their resources. The countries which supported Bashir financially, they are not doing so anymore, because each of these countries are suffering itself. The Saudi Arabia in 2015 gave Bashir $2.2 billion in order to provide mercenaries to fight the war in Yemen. Saudi Arabia cannot afford to do that now, because after so many years in war in Yemen, its economy is exhausted.
So Dr. Majduline, what happens next? They're having a low financial support, low friends. What happens next?
Despite the lack of support, the real lack of support for democracy by the so-called international community, including Western countries, it will fall. The people will take power. We have done this before. I'm certain that it will happen. It will happen, and the people will gain power, and it will be a civilian ruling. And it will happen. I can't put a time to it, but looking at everything, we are stronger, much stronger, and they are weaker, and every day they are weaker and weaker. So they will leave. They will simply leave. They will have to leave. At some point, they will have to leave. Like I said, the cracks are just too many, and the pressure on them, we've just pushed them all up against the wall, and they have very little room for maneuver.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Majduline. I like the positivity you're bringing there, and of course we do hope that the civilians get what they want there. Of course, you said that the civilians are saying no sharing with the military junta. Thank you so much, Dr. Majduline Tahir, for joining us on the program and sharing so much insight on what is going on in Sudan. Also like to thank Abdelrahim Abayazid for your insight on this particular topic. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, so this is the first phase that we've finished, and we're going over to the second phase, where we're still looking at military civilian transitions, but this time around not in Sudan, but in Mali. To stay tuned.
You're welcome back to the conversation. On the first half of the show, we've been talking about the transition in Sudan. It's time to switch gears and look at the situation in Mali. Now let's shift our attention to Mali, where transition talks between Mali's transitional government and ECOWAS Envoy, former Nigerian President Goodluck Jonathan, failed to make headway after 2 days of negotiations. Mali's transitional government is yet to reach an agreement with West Africa's regional bloc and when to hold elections that would restore democracy after a military takeover.
ECOWAS in January had placed tough sanctions on the West African state after the military junta that first seized power in a 2020 coup proposed extending its rule until 2025. The military government in Mali, which seized power in 2020, said it regretted the lack of compromise at this stage, but was open to agreeing a solution. With us live to discuss this is Vincent Obisie-Orlu, a researcher with Good Governance Africa. He joined us from Johannesburg, South Africa. It's good to have you join us on the conversation at this time.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Now, Vincent, the Mali junta, after the departure of the ECOWAS envoy, reduced the transition period from 29 to 24 months after the envoy had refused the 36-month transition period. Do you think the junta has shown enough commitments to restore constitutional order?
I think that the junta is, reacting to ECOWAS's pressure. And while they have not shown sufficient initiative to return to constitutional order, as ECOWAS would like, I think that this is a good step in the process of negotiations towards a deal for the return to constitutional order in Mali.
Now, Vincent, a technical committee of ECOWAS had proposed the organization of polls within 12 to 16 months with the help of an independent electoral management authority. Looking at the situation in Mali, the Sahel, and the underlying political and economic factors that led to the coup in the first place, is this a reasonable and sensible timetable? Is ECOWAS rushing Mali into elections? Because what's the obsession with elections if those underlying factors still remain there?
I think in many ways, ECOWAS is trying to show that it is doing what is within its mandate to do, which is to call for a return to electoral democratic processes when member states step out of line and become autocracies once again. Now, in light of the conditions on the ground that led to the military junta's takeovers, I think it's going to require a lot more work in terms of ECOWAS investing and vetting Mali to have these independent processes. I think ECOWAS is going to need to do more work on the foundational aspects of strengthening civil society within Mali to be ready for a return to democracy.
But why is ECOWAS so quiet when you have a civilian government that it goes against the constitution, contest for a third term in office or fourth term in office, when they're not fulfilling the wishes and aspirations of their people? ECOWAS is always mute on the quality of governance in West Africa. But once the military comes in, they start, threatening with sanctions and saying, no, this is what you have to do. Shouldn't the welfare of the people and the security be paramount?
I think the one thing that ECOWAS should learn from the situation in Mali, or I hope ECOWAS is going to be able to learn and integrate into how they approach future issues, is that ECOWAS needs to be able to handle and engage with the struggles of the man on the street, the everyday man on the streets, in terms of how they understand the governance challenges of the country, as opposed to simply engaging as what is now being called and termed by its critics as a boys' club for former presidents, right? And now, by having this situation where the former presidents are the ones who determine what ECOWAS can do, ECOWAS is limited in its ability. So I think that one thing to support this and to have ECOWAS be able to speak out and condemn third-termism, fourth-termism, unconstitutional changes to the democratic order of incumbent presidents is to have a setting or better empower ECOWAS to reflect and engage with the people on the ground and civil society within the different countries within ECOWAS.
All right, Vincent, you talk about ECOWAS engaging with the people and listening to their pleas. Now, the two sides say they are open to negotiations, and unfortunately, after 2 days, there was really no headway. So what is the way forward? Do you think ECOWAS should probably come to a compromise, because the military junta has moved forward before they said about 2025, and now they brought the transition period a bit forward? So should ECOWAS also make a bit of compromise here?
I think ECOWAS making some compromise might be viewed by external actors, external groupings, be it the European Union, the United States, certain members of the African Union, as ECOWAS showing weakness. So it's going to be difficult for ECOWAS to be able to step down and negotiate or accept what Mali's offered. I think ECOWAS is going to continue to try and negotiate a shorter time period, right? But what I see in this situation with the Malian junta being willing to step down from 2025 to now 24 months is a willingness to engage in dialogue. And I think ECOWAS should maintain some level of dialogue with the Malian junta to better move and reduce the timeline. We're only going to know what the maximum the Malian junta is going to be willing to give if engagements and conversations with them continue.
Now, in the rule of negotiations, now you talk about ECOWAS not showing a sign of weakness, but let's look at the sanctions there, because earlier on Gbenga talked about listening to the plights of the people, and we see people suffering as regards to the financial sanctions placed on Mali. So do you also think there should be a bit of compromise or negotiations with the sanctions, because the people of Mali are suffering with the sanctions, not necessarily the military junta?
Something that we need to start to embrace better within the international community is that sanctions don't really often work as we'd like them to. They often end up impacting the lowest of the low, the people on the street, the day-to-day Malian, the day-to-day person going about their business. And I think that in its negotiations with the Malian junta, ECOWAS might need to, as you said, concede and be willing to step back and reduce some of the sanctions they've presented. Sticks and carrots are necessary. You can't just have carrots, nor can you just have stick, when you're negotiating, trying to move and nudge a opponent in a negotiation towards your desired outcome. So I think ECOWAS is going to need to be willing to come down from some of the sanctions, as well as understand that the more sanctions that are placed and the more the people in Mali suffer and struggle because of this, the more the military junta is able to create and develop the narrative that ECOWAS is actually doing the bidding of former colonial powers, as opposed to and opposing this new direction that Mali wants to take. So it's going to be very important for ECOWAS to play this politics of the long game.
Now, before the Malian junta announced their proposed timetable, they did say they set up a committee and they consulted with the people, and that's why they presented the 5-year timetable, which ECOWAS and some members of the international community frowned at. There is all-time anti-French sentiment on the streets of Bamako and different parts of Mali. The junta is quite popular with the people, and they seem to enjoy widespread support. Why does the international community disregard what ordinary Malians on the street want? And does that consultation with the people before presenting the proposed timetable, does it give the junta any sort of legitimacy?
The question of legitimacy with the junta is a really difficult one for us to effectively answer, because the junta has or seems to have some element of popular legitimacy and popular support from the Malian people. However, ECOWAS cannot willingly, wholeheartedly accept a military takeover within its region. It is against and opposition to the ECOWAS Charter. And so by saying and accepting and embracing that military junta as it's okay, the people gave the okay for this to happen,
would lose credibility.
ECOWAS would be Sorry?
They might lose credibility as a regional bloc. Yeah.
So if ECOWAS is to, with what the people have said in terms of how long they see the time frame for this transition back to democracy, the junta does have some elements of legitimacy. However, this is not an element of legitimacy that ECOWAS accepts or fully acknowledges. ECOWAS's mandate is that whenever there's a military takeover, the regional bloc will attempt to return the country in question back to democracy and lead them back to democracy, set up a framework and a timeline that would return it back to democracy. Now, if ECOWAS is to achieve this, right, it is going to require for the people of Mali to be willing to accept or embrace or buy into ECOWAS's plans, as opposed to just having the situation where ECOWAS has said, let's get back to democracy, and the Malian people are saying, no, we're still enjoying the military government's help and assistance with changing and fixing the situation. As we said earlier, we need to go back to the reasons why this takeover happened. It happened because of the contested legitimacy of the most recent elections. It happened because of the challenge of the Sahel, the security situation of the Sahel, which the military junta has claimed it's going to take care and manage. It's happened because of the lack of effective development and empowerment of the people in the country through years and years of democratic rule. And the people are now saying and questioning, well, what have we gained from this? And I think what's going to be important is, in returning to democracy, there needs to be some way that the people can see on the ground that a return to democracy will benefit them, will benefit their bottom line, will benefit their interests, as opposed to this being a view that it is this high-minded idea, democracy and democratic governance, whereas the people on the ground can see military rule and military order and how that influences, impacts their lives in the immediate term.
Okay, Vincent, let's look at how this political instability has affected Malians, because we hear of news of demanding humanitarian aid because people are hungry and dying in Mali. We also hear of security concerns in Mali. Do you think the military junta has fared well so far? Because they deposed the former government, as you said rightly, due to this crisis going on in the country. And they said they're going to prefer a better solution to the people. But so far, what has been the effect of this political instability on Malians?
So far, the military junta is trying to do what it said it'll do. I don't think that it's doing great in comparison to the government. What I do see, though, is that the military junta is having more access to resources, and that is what is supporting it, as opposed to doing significantly better. Yes, the questions and challenges of insecurity still exist in Mali and in the Sahel region, where Malian troops are facing against insurgents, right? But there's also a number of challenges that they're driving this instability. So while the military junta is, claiming that it's going to fix the situation, it's not effectively able to address some of the underlying factors driving this. One of the underlying factors that really needs to be better explored is how unemployment and poverty create situations where, for people, they are more willing, there are more opportunities for them to join these groups, these militant groups in the region, as opposed to stay and continue their day-to-day lives. And when the military attacks civilians and civilians get caught up in these conflicts, civilians who are caught up and attacked are more likely to now view the military as an opponent to them and see or sympathize in some cases with the junta. So it's difficult for the military junta to say we are effectively dealing with the issue, right? As opposed to they're trying to be a stopgap in the moment while showing that the reason we took over is we are fulfilling something of what we claimed we do.
Yes. And finally, Vincent, before we let you go, how do you see this playing out? And why is it important for the transition to get back on course in Mali?
I see it playing out. What I would like to see is for ECOWAS and Mali to continue negotiations. I'd like to see ECOWAS showing good faith and presenting a willingness to remove certain sanctions, while also assisting in the building up of civil society and institutional frameworks within Mali for a democratic transition. What I'd like to see from the Malian junta is for the Malian junta to return power to civilian authorities and open space for democratic elections. Of course, some of the junta leaders will contest as transformed military to democratic leadership, but I'd like to see a growing or an opportunity for democracy to return to Mali. I'm not a fortune teller. I don't know if this is going to happen. I can't tell you a timeline of when it will happen. But what it means for Mali to continue to stay in the state that it's in is the people of Mali are going to suffer. The sanctions are really tormenting and really targeting and afflicting the people severely. However, and it's not really doing much in terms of the favorability of the junta. And so it's going to be important for ECOWAS to bring this back, continue negotiations, continue engagement, and offer some concessions to the Malian junta, as unpopular as it might seem, to bring and fast track this. Look, we moved from 36 months to 24 months. Yeah. I believe there is still, with the reducing of sanctions, as well as ECOWAS engaging in developing and supporting civil society within Mali, there's the possibility that we can move further, maybe down to 18 months or 12 months. We'd like to see this, but none of this is going to happen unless negotiations and compromises are made from both sides.
All right, thank you so much, Vincent, for this insight. While we do wait, you said as rightly that they were not fortune tellers, but we're hoping that there are fruitful negotiations. And of course, things are put in place because it's not just putting a transition government. Things need to be put in place. Constitution needs to be formed. Thank you so much, Vincent Obisie-Orlu, for joining us on the conversation at this time.
Thank you, Vincent.
Thank you for having me.
That's all we can take on today's edition of The Conversation. The first half of the program, we talked about the transition in Sudan, and in the second half, we looked at Mali. This is where we draw the curtains on today's show. I'm Gbenga Aborowa.
And I'm Rita Omodia. See you again on Wednesday.